Hello. Is this on? Okay, cool. Hello, welcome everybody to our very first session of the Team and Culture Track. My name is Shannon Winter, and I will be your Team and Culture Track MC for the next 2 days. We actually have a very big track of 15 talks lined up, so there'll also be another woman named Kendall helping out because some are going on at the same time, and I can't be in 2 rooms at once, unfortunately. But I think if you've been to Summits past, the Team and Culture Track is all about teams. I'm sure you've seen the team theme spread throughout Summit so far, but Atlassian really believes that in order to have successful companies and achieve really bold, great things, you need the right teams, you need the right tools, and you also need the right practices. And this track really focuses on, a lot of it's product agnostic, it focuses on those practices and those teams. So we have an incredible lineup, everything from how to give feedback, which Dan's going to talk about in a little, to how to unite teams, to how to goal set. So we're really excited for that. But a quick reminder that you'll be able to rate speakers in the app afterwards. We'd love to hear your feedback. It helps us create a even better track for the next year. So our first speaker, you're in for a real treat. His name is Dan North, and we were lucky enough to get him to come here to present on a really important skill that we all need in work and our life, but it's not always an easy thing to do, which is give feedback. So Dan is a technology and organizational change specialist. He's been coaching, coding, and consulting for over 25 years, and he now has his own business. And a fun fact is that he plays drums, and he just got an electric drum kit for his birthday, so you'll have to make him do that later. All right, without further ado, Dan North.
Thanks, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Wasn't that a fantastic keynote? I'm very excited about that keynote because there were a couple of things in there that made me very happy. One of the things was Mike talking about empathy and saying that empathy is a thing that he thinks is really important, because I think it's really important too. And the other is this idea of diversity and inclusion and belonging, which I think is a fantastic word to bring into the diversity conversation. So, okay, I'm going to disappoint some of you. I'm not actually going to talk about how to make a sandwich, so I do apologize. I am instead going to talk about feedback. And I'm going to talk about feedback in a number of sections. The first thing I want to do is describe what I mean by feedback. What is feedback? How does it work? As a concept, feedback as a thing. And then I want to kind of bring it to people, and how do we give and receive feedback? So how can we deliver feedback? How can you structure feedback in a way that can be heard and received and actioned? And a couple of models for delivering feedback. One of the few qualifications I have is I'm a qualified life coach, which is fun. It means I can actually coach people. And it also means that when people just update their LinkedIn profile to say Agile Coach, I cry a little inside. Because, yeah, I can do coaching because it's like, you know, it's basically project management, but at people. Right? No, it's not. It's a different thing. So, and of course, one thing I do want to talk about is how to receive feedback as well. So let's take a look then. What is feedback? What do we mean by feedback? So feedback starts in, well, a long time ago, starts in kind of electrical and mechanical engineering is where the term originated from. And then it's formalized in system theory. So the idea of a system, a simple system, has inputs and outputs, okay? So inputs cause stuff to happen in the system, and you have outputs, which are the effects of a system. So we can talk about cause and effect. The problem happens when some of the outputs become inputs, and that's feedback. You feed some of the outputs back into the system, okay? Not terribly complicated. The fun thing is it causes changes in the system that are really hard to predict. So you've got a number of different kinds of feedback. The first kind of feedback that we will all have experienced is what's called reinforcing feedback. So the more you do something, the more you do something. Arms races are reinforcing feedback. I start throwing rocks, and you decide that, I can build bows and arrows, and I get guns, and you get bombs, and the whole thing just escalates. There's nothing to stop it escalating, and the person with the biggest blowy-uppy things wins. We don't want that. So there's also reinforcing feedback going the other way. The less I do something, the less I do something. So the less I have, the less I end up with. And this is where you end up with I read a fun statistic this morning on the Twitters where everything is true and reliable, that the 3 richest people in the US, which is Bezos, Buffett, and Bill Gates, have more wealth than 50% of the US, so 160 million people. So I don't know, that doesn't seem entirely fair to me. But there you go. So that when you have, you get more. When you don't have, you get less. And this is reinforcing again, but in a damping way. Then you have a fun kind of feedback called oscillating feedback. And this is where you've been in the shower, and you get in the shower and it's too hot, so you turn the thermostat, and it's too cold, right? And then you turn the thermostat, and then it ends up just being like this, and you're having a really miserable time in the shower, yeah? And that's just how to have a miserable shower, is oscillating feedback. Or where you steer, and then you're moving across, maybe on ice, and you oversteer, and you kind of swerve down the road like this. That's also oscillating feedback. And one of the reasons we have oscillating feedback is we get input back into the system, and we react, weirdly, too quickly. When you react too quickly, you can oversteer or understeer, or, again, get into this nasty arms race thing. So what we do, in order to make sense of this, is we introduce delay. Okay? So if I pause slightly, I get some feedback, and I go, wait a minute. Before I turn this, I'm going to wait a minute. So I turn the thermostat in the shower, and I wait a few seconds for the water temperature to adjust. Then what I find is it's much more like safe cracking. You turn it, and you turn a little bit. Perfect. All right, I can open the shower now. Lovely. Okay? So this delay is really important. I want to look at this delay thing because it's really critical to how we do feedback. So let's think about any system that changes its behavior based on feedback is known as an adaptive system. Okay? So adaptive systems rely on feedback. That's the characteristic of an adaptive system. So you steering a car as you drive along the road, that's an adaptive system. You're getting input, which is the other cars moving around, feedback from the car, and you're choosing how you're going to drive, how you're going to accelerate, that kind of thing. With an adaptive system, with feedback, timing is everything. Okay? What does that mean? That means small and frequent feedback is better than large and infrequent feedback. Now, this is an Atlassian conference, okay? So I want you to think about this not just in terms of people talking to each other, and usually when I talk about feedback, it's in terms of people getting face-to-face talking to one another, but most of the Atlassian tools, I actually go for all of the Atlassian tools, but certainly most of the Atlassian tools are feedback-oriented. Whenever you comment on an issue, that's feedback, okay? Whenever you assign something to someone, that's feedback. So all of these little interactions, and some of them are little micro-interactions, are all feedback. What message are you giving? There was a lovely thing in the diversity segment where they were talking about the comment tool. And the comment tool can spot kind of aggressive language and say, are you sure you want to send that? Should you maybe go for a walk right now? Which I quite like, right? I like a tool that says, wait a minute, Dan, you're a little bit cross. Go and take a moment, okay? Because when you hit send, that's going to upset some people. It's going to impact some people. So the longer the feedback, the more what's called drift occurs, okay? The further away you are when you hear something. Imagine your pain receptors only triggered once an hour. And you get this message from your brain saying, 45 minutes ago, you put your hand in a fire. Oh, yeah, it's not looking good. Oh no, right? That doesn't work, yeah? Think about braking systems in a car. Traditional braking systems, you put your foot on the pedal and brakes engage and the wheels stop. Modern systems, what happens is you press the pedal down and the brake engages and disengages hundreds of times a second. Okay, and what that means is you can steer while you're skidding, and you can steer on ice and those kind of things. So when you get very, very fine-grained feedback, it's super powerful. So delaying feedback increases drifts. It reduces a system's responsiveness. It limits the options you've got. If you don't have that information coming in, you don't know what you can do. You don't know what you don't know. Okay? And it also increases the processing effort. The more we've drifted, the more work I need to do to come back on track. Okay, so if we get frequent small feedback, then we can react to that feedback, and typically the reaction is small. It's like with code. If I make frequent small commits, I'm less likely to diverge from the main line. Okay? Which is why agile teams break work into small pieces. Okay, if I work in small pieces, I can ship small pieces, I can get feedback from small pieces, I have a process that's adaptable. So how does this apply to people? How does this apply to human beings? Well, human systems, which isn't just a single human being, but teams, organizations of human beings, interactions between human beings, rely on feedback. So I just want to take a moment to think about how that works. Okay? So why do we ask for feedback? If you ask people why they ask for feedback, this is one of the reasons surveys are really hard. Okay? Surveys are really hard because people don't tell you what they think. They tell you what they think you want them to say. All through the 80s, there were the Coca-Cola wars between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And people would do this blind taste test and say, which of those do you prefer? And they go, oh, I prefer Pepsi. Big Pepsi van people, right? I think Pepsi is great. And it's a hot day, and they walk into the store and they go, I'll take a Coke. Right? Why? Because in their mind, all they have is a red can with a white flash on it, with a bead of what going down it, and they go, that's the mental image I've got. Okay? People don't do what they say they will do. Surveys are really hard. So when you ask people why they ask for feedback, they say this. They say, I want to improve or modify my behavior. Please give me feedback so I can improve my behavior. That's why I ask for feedback. What else do you ask for feedback? I ask for feedback when I'm stuck. I ask for feedback to get help. And you go, okay, that sounds really... And then you kind of scratch the surface and you say, why are you really asking for feedback? And you say, because I was awesome. I was awesome, and I want you to know that I was awesome. And it's a little immodest for me to say, hey, I was awesome. Check this out. Check out the thing. So instead I go, I've just done this thing. I wonder if you could give me some feedback on the clearly awesome thing I did. Right? You know, just out of, right? And then we can flip this around and we can ask the same question to the same group of people and we say, well, why do you offer feedback then? Why do you give people feedback? Why do you want to give people feedback? And they say, well, clearly, Dan, you systems thinking kind of guy, it's to improve the system of work. The reason I offer feedback is to improve how we're doing work. And that gels with the person asking for feedback, wanting to improve how they work, and everything's awesome. And also, of course, because we're lovely, empathic human beings, I want to model a culture of encouraging feedback. If I offer feedback, other people offer feedback, and then we create a system. It's a reinforcing loop, right? We create a system of offering feedback, and you go, great. And then you look at actually why people are offering feedback, and especially in the sentence, can I offer you some feedback, right? It's really about control. Can I offer you some feedback about how I want you to act? Yeah. Can I offer you some feedback? Can I offer you some feedback on your code? Can I offer you some feedback on your continuous delivery pipeline to demonstrate my superior knowledge and deeper experience than you? Yeah. So when someone says, can I offer you some feedback, it's often a passive-aggressive controlling thing saying, can I explain why I believe you are wrong? Right? So really what I want to ask here, and again, this is a skill, it's a set of skills, and when we try any new skill for the first time, we're rubbish at it. That's the nature of learning new skills, okay? So in order to get good at feedback, understanding how it works, practicing it is really important. So why do we receive feedback? Why do we offer feedback? Think about what your motives really are. Now, here's where we get a bit meta. Feedback is itself a system. Ooh, okay, that has feedback. Let me explain what I mean. We start by offering or seeking feedback, okay? I'd like some feedback, please, or I'd like to offer you some feedback. That's how feedback starts. What happens then? Then what happens is someone hears it, okay? So feedback is then heard, which is great. And then hopefully, once they hear that feedback, it's actioned, right? And this creates a loop, okay? This creates a feedback loop of feedback. If any part of that feedback cycle breaks down, the entire system breaks down. So if people don't feel that their feedback is being heard, they'll stop offering it. If you don't make it easy to offer feedback, there's a lot of apps I use, and right in the moment, I'm using the app, and there's something that's really irritating me or something that's really delighting me, and I want to let those app developers know. And in the really good apps, there's always a button that says feedback. And it's usually one tap away. So they're directly on the screen, it's one tap away. And I can tab, and it says, send feedback. And I go, I really like that I didn't have to think about blah, send. That's going to land on some developer's desk or some product manager's desk, and they're going to look at that and they're going to say, oh, someone's using our product and we made them happy. And that's going to make their day and it's going to reinforce that behavior. Likewise, I might see something and go, oh, it's really annoying. It's really frustrating that I can't paste my password from my password manager into your login screen because some idiot thinks that pasting into a password field is a security problem or something, yeah? Let me just tell you why I think that's silly. And I'm just one voice out of many, many voices. But if a whole bunch of people are sending them the same feedback, then they start to listen, and that can cause change in behavior. One tiny example, and I really was surprised, I'll be honest. I was using LinkedIn some months ago, and I'm an independent. I go around different companies causing mischief. It's my day job. And I had a new client, and part of their onboarding was they said, oh, Dan, we need you to send us your resume, your CV. I was like, yeah, that's interesting. I haven't had one of those for about 12 years. So either I'm going to sit there and write a resume for everything I've done in the last, I don't know. And I thought, oh, I can go to LinkedIn and I can just get all my stuff. And I can go to LinkedIn, I can look you up and I can say, save your profile as a PDF, and I can do that. And I went to my own profile, I said, save as a PDF. It just doesn't, it's not there. You can't save your own profile, which I thought was really daft, because you might want to, because someone might ask for it. So anyway, there was a feedback link, and I said, do you know you can't save your own password, your own profile as a PDF? And sent it off into, I assumed, the void, right? And about 2 days later, I could save my profile as a PDF. I have no idea what happens in there, but they're huge, and they've been bought by huger, right? And still they can be that responsive to customer feedback. Or maybe I was just super lucky in terms of timing. I don't know. I'll never know. I'm going to choose to pretend that I had an impact there, okay? Feedback is a system. It's offered, it's heard, it's actioned. And only when it's actioned do you reinforce that loop. Because otherwise you get, hello, your call is important to us. Well, it clearly isn't, because otherwise, A, you'd have enough people to answer the phones, all right? And B, you'd fix your crappy product so I wouldn't be phoning in the first place, right? That would happen if my call were important to you, yeah? Because I'd see that feedback actioned. Nothing. Tumbleweed. Hello, you are number 712 in the... Oh, okay. So then, let's think about what happens when we give people feedback. When we deliver feedback, what does that look like? And again, I want to reinforce that when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about face-to-face feedback, but be aware that things like Jira comments, Crucible code reviews, Slack discussions, all of those things are longer lived than that in-the-moment exchange. Okay, so be aware of how you are, who you are, when you're typing things into boxes as well. So delivering feedback, this is every school teacher in the world is taught this. Most parents pick this up, okay? Feedback should be about behavior. It's what you did, not who you are. You're not a bad child. You did this thing that's probably not okay, and we should talk about the thing you did, okay? The problem is the way we're wired as humans, even when behavior is offered even when feedback is offered at a behavior level, we hear it at a personal level. So if I say, your work is sloppy, okay, which I probably wouldn't say that, but if I said, yeah, your work is sloppy, what you're going to hear is you are a sloppy worker. That's an identity statement. That's putting you in a box labeled sloppy worker. That's not about your work anymore, it's about you. So I could try some other things. I could say instead, your work has been sloppy recently. Still not great, but at least it's time-bound, right? There's been a clear deterioration in the quality of your work. I might say something like, on this specific occasion, now I can give you an example. I can give you an example where your work was substandard, where this is what one would expect, we would agree this is okay, this is what we've got, and we can both talk about the delta. Yeah? That's probably a slightly more constructive conversation. A more honest conversation might be this. If you did these things, I'm going to offer you a different way to do things now. Your work quality would improve. Okay? Hey, that's better, right? But now if I say something like, if you did these things, it would make me happier, I'm now owning my own part in this interaction. Okay? And this sort of line of thinking led to a lovely, lovely feedback model called SBI. Has anyone come across SBI as a feedback model? Hooray, I get to tell you about SBI. I love this. So SBI, it came out of one of these like American management schools, and I was really surprised because it's good. Right? And usually the stuff that comes out of American management schools, or any management schools really, is just guff, or it's just rehashed guff from somewhere else, or it's just so wide of the mark. But this was really powerful, and it's been taken on in schools because it's just such a simple, workable, effective system. So lots of teachers use this model. SBI stands for Situation, Behaviour, Impact. Okay, so this is the model. Situation is this. I'm not going to give you feedback generally about stuff. We're going to talk about an occasion. And ideally it's an occasion recently, because remember, small frequent feedback is the win. Yeah? So we're going to talk about a situation. It's a specific occasion. It's a specific setting. It's a specific circumstance. There was this time when, recently. And what happened at this time was you did stuff. There was a situation that we both remember recently, and in that situation you did these things. Here's the tricky bit. When you're describing the behavior, you have to use non-judgmental language. Right? So you, I don't know, you were being really mean. Well, that's a judgment. That's a judgment on your behavior. What did you actually do that I think was mean? Yeah? Where this gets challenging is saying something nice about behavior is also judging it. I thought you handled that interaction brilliantly. Bad feedback. Weirdly, bad feedback. Why is it bad feedback? Because it doesn't tell me what was brilliant about it. It doesn't tell me what I could do again in the future. If instead I say, you handled that situation with a difficult client by responding specifically and factually to all of their challenges, and I noticed that then changed the tone of the conversation, all of those are observations, and anyone could make those observations. There's no judging going on there. Okay? So behavior, non-judgmental report of what you saw. Impact, this is the personal bit. This is how I felt. Now, you can't impact on someone else's behalf. In this meeting, you said this, and so Shelley felt, I don't know, I'm not Shelley, and it's not appropriate for me to put words in her mouth. Right? What I might do is I might see Shelley looking beaten up or something, and I might have a chat with her afterwards and say, let's talk about that. Yeah? But you don't get to give feedback on someone else's behalf. That's not okay. Right? So this is the model. Specific situation, non-judgmental behavior, what the impact was that was on me. And again, it's not necessarily negative. It could be a really positive thing. You did this thing. You handled this tricky client in this way. I felt really empowered by that because I've been in those situations before and I'm rubbish at them. Okay? I can be judgmental about me. I'm rubbish at those. And I can see that I've just learnt a tool there that I'm going to use in future conversations. So thanks for that. That's brilliant. So here's an example. In the team meeting on Friday, very specific situation. We have team meetings every day. It was the team meeting on Friday. Here's what you did. You spoke across me several times. That's not judging. That's just what happened. I was in the middle of a sentence. You started speaking. And I noticed that happen on 3 or 4 occasions. I wrote a couple of them down. So so it's completely, and in fact, if it's recorded, we can go back and look at it. Right? But you spoke across me several times. That was a factual observation of what happened. And I felt like I wasn't being allowed to share my opinion with the team. Okay? Oh, well, you shouldn't have felt, hang on a minute, you don't get to tell me how I felt. I don't get to judge how you behaved. You don't get to tell me how I felt. Okay, that's how feedback works. So I can tell you the impact that your behavior had on me in that situation. That's the whole of SBI. It's a super, super powerful model. Quick example. I had my last proper job when I was gainfully employed. I'm now gainfully unemployed. When I was gainfully employed, I was working in a satellite office of a global trading firm. They're headquartered in Chicago, and I was in London. And one of the London kind of leads had his boss was in Chicago, and so they had this remote relationship. The guy in London was fantastic, really good at his job. The guy in Chicago was fantastic, really good at his job. These two were absolutely at loggerheads. There was a really, really high degree of conflict, low trust, and all this kind of stuff. And I was really confused by this because I got on well with both of them, and I would travel quite often between the 2 locations. And so I just said, look, why don't we try this SBI thing? Because I've just been exploring this, and I've been learning about this. And let's try that. And so I said, okay, so I want you to think about, rather than going, oh, he always, whenever we speak, he's a da-da-da. If you speak in generalizations like that, I can't do anything. You always blah. Well, okay, thanks. Right? If you can't give me some examples where that happened, I can't change my behavior. It's difficult for me. So I said, what I want you to do is think about some situations recently where you've interacted and it could have gone better. And so they went off and did this. One of them made a spreadsheet. Because that's kind of what he does. And he had this spreadsheet with each line had like situation, behavior, impacts, and he had about half a dozen examples. And so he had his spreadsheet, and the other chap had some notes, and they got together, and they didn't even get together locally. I think they got together over a video chat, and they started going through the spreadsheet, and this amazing thing happened, is by about the second or third item, it was like, this situation, yeah, you did this, yeah, I remember doing that, this is the impact it had on me. What? Yeah, I felt this. Wow. How did that happen? No, that's not what I meant at all. What I meant was da-da-da-da-da. Much healthier interaction. 3 or 4, and what they started to see very clearly, because there was a really obvious pattern, was that there was this recurring pattern of behavior, was that this chap would say something, this chap would hear something completely different for whatever reason, geography, location, time zones, different context, all of that stuff, and hear a completely different message and respond accordingly. And so they had they had an arms race of distrust. And in this one conversation, the whole thing just fell away, and literally the following day, they were just completely different relationship. So I just went, right, that's going in my back pocket. I'm never going to not use SBI. So, quick sidebar, because we can. Do you want to mention, who's come across the ladder of inference? Chris Argyris. Anyone seen this? So Chris Argyris, British guy, he's one of those sort of systems thinking people. And he talks about this lovely, this is an illustration from one of his books. He talks about the idea that we all have this ladder of filters, and most of the filters are unconscious. And what happens is I have my ladder of filters, and you have your ladder of filters, and we're having a conversation, and I'm not talking to you. I think I'm talking to you, and you think you're talking back. But I'm talking all the way down through my ladder, across all the way up your ladder. So we have observable data and experiences, right? That observable data and experiences, bad news, you never see. You are never consciously aware of raw data. Because you, and I say you, I mean all of us, we have mental filters, they're called cognitive biases, and those mental filters handle the vast input of data coming in and say, signal, this is interesting. And so everything that's observable gets collapsed down into things that I think are interesting. And then things that I think are interesting, I add meaning. And meaning I add from context and history and whatever else, nature and nurture and all those things. Based on meaning, in order to short circuit having to do processing all the time, I then layer assumptions on top of that. From those assumptions, I draw conclusions. From those conclusions, I draw beliefs, and that leads to my actions. But all you see is my actions. And those actions come to you, guess what, as raw data. What do you do with that raw data? All of that stuff. So in order to have a healthy dialogue, being aware of models like this and saying, wait a minute, I think I just said this thing, the way you acted suggests that you believe this thing, which would be based on those conclusions, so I'm going to start to read into those assumptions. Why don't we talk about those assumptions? Why don't we start unpacking each other's ladders and figure out where we're disconnecting? Because if we're living the same reality, we're living in the same universe, there's some level of meaning or assumption where we've miscommunicated. So, I just want to talk about 3 really useful models then of structuring feedback. So we've got situation, behavior, impact. That's how we're going to present this stuff. What stuff are we going to present? So the first model starts in the 60s and 70s, because this is when all the good psychology research happened, because most of it was unregulated. Okay, nowadays you can't do stuff like this. And this was doing behavioral experiments on porpoises in a big tank. And what they were doing was modeling reward systems. And so they had these porpoises, and they said, right, we're not going to do any negative reinforcement. There will be no punishing of porpoises. What we'll do, though, is whenever they do something that we want, we'll reward them with fish. So we'll have a reward-only system. And we're like, okay, let's see how that works. And they had these porpoises, a couple of porpoises in a big tank, and they had a hoop. And every time a porpoise jumped through the hoop, they got a fish. And so the porpoises are swimming up and down a bit, and then the first porpoise goes, whee, like this, jumps through, and then comes up, gets a fish. The second porpoise jumps through, comes up, gets a fish. First porpoise jumps through, does a backflip. Like, that was cool. Second porpoise jumps through, does a double backflip. Where's my fish? Right? And what they noticed was that when they just rewarded, not only did they reinforce the behavior, but the porpoises wanted to please them further. So the idea with porpoise feedback, this is in a new situation, low trust or low rapport, you're building a new team, we just offer what's called specific positive regard. The commits you're giving in your code are really clear. It's really obvious what happened there. I like your intention revealing commits. I like the way you're interacting with your teammates. I like the way you're contributing to our stand-ups, okay? Just specific positive regard. Assume that all of the other behavior will self-correct. And sometimes you've got to bite your tongue, okay? But assume all the other behavior will self-correct. And the weird thing is, in most cases, all the other behavior will self-correct. Okay? So, that's porpoise feedback. The second model is, this is the one that everyone thinks they know or everyone's heard of, and by and large, everyone gets wrong, okay? So porpoise feedback, just specific positive regard. Sandwich feedback. Who's heard of sandwich feedback? Right, most of you. Sandwich feedback. Hi, I really like your hair. Your work's rubbish. Nice shoes. Have a good day. Right? That's not sandwich feedback, right? So, saying something really mean in the middle of two nice things is not sandwich feedback. That's just passive aggression, right? Labeled with sandwich feedback. Sandwich feedback is this. We're going to offer specific positive regard again. We're going to open with that. The reason we open with that is the meta message with specific positive regard is, I see you. I can only offer specific positive regard if I've been noticing you. Right? Not general stuff. I can say, oh yeah, you're doing great work. What work am I doing? Bluster, bluster. Right? No, there's this thing you did that's epic. You go, oh, thanks. Oh, I feel noticed. Right? Now what I do is I offer what's called a growing edge. And remember earlier on I was saying, rather than saying your work is sloppy, that's not a growing edge. That's criticism. A growing edge is, here's some things you could do differently that might improve what you're doing. Okay, so a growing edge is an option to improve something in some way. Okay, it's actionable, it's towards motivated, not away from motivated. So it's not stop doing that thing, it's here's a thing you could maybe start doing. That might be interesting. And then you finish with general positive regard. Because the tone of the conversation should be, I've just offered you a growing edge, but everything's all fine. You don't have to do the thing I'm saying. Honestly, we're all good. I just thought this thing might be useful for you. And you go, oh, thank you. And you might action that thing now. You might keep it in your back pocket for later. You might not do it at all. None of that matters. That's all fine. That's your choice to do with your feedback. So sandwich feedback, specific positive regard, I see you. A growing edge, here's an option. Here's a thing you could do if you choose to. General positive regard, we're okay whether you do or not. We're all good. Okay? So this is now typical day-to-day, you're building a team and things are kind of going okay. Then the third model of feedback, this is now in a high-trust, high-rapport team, a high-functioning team, is we have Atkins feedback, named after the Atkins diet. The famous thing with the Atkins diet is you don't have any carbs in it. Okay? So it's the same as sandwich feedback, but without the bread. Okay? So Atkins feedback is, here's a growing edge. I don't need to offer you specific positive regard because you know I notice you, because you know I care, because you know I see you. Right? I don't need to offer you general positive regard because you know this is just an option. But that comes with time. You can't start a new relationship, start a new team with Atkins feedback. You haven't earned that right yet. Okay? So, porpoise feedback, low trust, low rapport, new team, new people. Sandwich feedback, specific positive regard, growing edge, general positive regard. Atkins feedback, just the meat. Okay, just the growing edge. So there's some things to go and practice, to go and try out. And then the last thing I want to say, really, is about receiving feedback. So here's my entire canon of information about how to receive feedback. Well, when someone offers you feedback, what do you do? You say thank you. You say thank you. That's what you do. Most people, right, remember this is a skill and it's a learnable skill, and because people don't realize it's a learnable skill, they don't bother learning it. Most people, when they try to offer you feedback, will do it badly. It's not their fault. Most people, when they start coding, will do it badly. That's not their fault either. Most people, when they start walking, do it badly. Right? We don't go beating up on 1-year-olds and go, that's rubbish walking. You keep falling on your bum. That's not walking. What do you call that? You go, you did 2 steps before you fell over. That's epic, right? That's what we do. When someone offers us feedback, however clumsily, there's an intent there. And if we assume positive intent, they're trying to help. So I say thank you, and then I go away and I unpack what they said, and I think about what did they mean by that? What's the useful nugget that I can take out of that? There is no step 2. You just say thank you. Even if you want to shout at them and go, how dare you? Bite your tongue, say thank you, smile, go away, process it, okay? And again, practice hearing feedback at a behavioral level, even if it's presented at a personal level. You're a da-da-da-da-da-da. What I'm hearing is, I've done some things that has led to that person thinking they need to share that with me. Let me go and process that. Thank you. Okay. So just a couple of concluding thoughts then. Feedback affects the system. Okay? Feedback affects the system. What does that mean? The person is a system. A human being is a system. A team of human beings is a system. A program made up of teams is a system. An organization is a system. We have systems of systems of systems. It's turtles all the way down. Okay? Feedback affects that system. Be honest about your motives. Why are you asking for feedback? Are you asking for feedback because you want recognition? Because if you want recognition, let's figure out why we're not getting that. Let's go fix the real problem. Be honest about your own motives about offering feedback. Are you genuinely offering feedback? Have you got positive, specific intent in mind? Do you have a growing edge you want to offer? Or are you just trying to control people? Are you trying to make everyone a bit like you? Okay? And we all do this. We all do this, which is why, again, diversity, inclusion, belonging is such an important set of topics to keep on banging on about, because our default position is similarity. Okay? All of our cognitive biases are predicated on that. Okay? We find difference unusual until we train ourselves not to find difference unusual, but instead to find it a really powerful positive force. Be honest about your own motives. Practice giving and receiving feedback is a set of skills. You will be rubbish at them to start with. Okay, I've been, as a technical giver and receiver of feedback, I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm not good at it, right? And when I say I'm not good at it, I'm not being like super modest or faux anything. I'm saying there's situations where it's emotionally charged, I'm angry or tired or not feeling particularly resourceful, and there's an opportunity for feedback and I blow it. Okay, we all do it. Okay, so practice giving and receiving feedback. And always, always say thank you. Okay? Thank you. We have 2 minutes for questions.
2 minutes for questions.
And feedback.
I will run out a mic that I'll go grab right now. If someone wants to shout it out, he can repeat it.
I can repeat them and
Yeah.
You were going to say that, weren't you? I'll shut up now.
Anyone?
So. Yes, of course. Let me press the magic button. Boo, boo, boo. Oh, I do apologize. Okay, so yes. So recap the recap. Feedback affects the system, and there's lots of systems. There's systems of systems, all work, and all social stuff as well. This isn't just work stuff. This is in your life. You're a system of systems. Think about why you're offering feedback, particularly offering feedback. There's so much subconscious, unaware controlling that goes on through the veneer of feedback. Giving and receiving feedback is a set of skills, and regardless of how the feedback is given, even if it's a really barbed, comment or whatever, you just say thank you. Unless saying thank you is going to sound passive-aggressive, right? In which case you just walk away. Yeah. So be aware of how your behavior affects other people. Fantastic.
One question.
Yeah, sure.
Giving feedback, does it also depend on the culture that you work for? Or you are in?
Brilliant question. Does giving feedback depend on the culture you're in? Yes, right? Unequivocally yes. And also, it's a reinforcing loop, right? The way you give and receive feedback can affect the culture you're in. The culture you're in can affect the way you give and receive feedback. And this goes right back to things like safety, team safety, psychological safety. You can start in and I've done this, I've been in really toxic, low-trust environments where things like just making yourself a bit vulnerable. I did this by accident once. I came in as a leader, as a tech lead in a team that was really dysfunctional, and I screwed up on my first day by, I made a decision about something that didn't work, and so I just owned it. And about a couple of days later, I was like, I'm looking at this thing and it's just not working. And the team pretty much went, like, this sharp intake of breath. I was like, what happened? What just happened there? And what had happened there was the boss, right, had admitted failure, had admitted that he didn't know what he was doing. And that kind of opened the floodgates for the team to allow themselves to not know what they were doing. And it turns out one of the underlying issues that the team had was they were all kind of making it up, and no one wanted to admit vulnerability. And so by modeling vulnerability, and it was completely accidental. I didn't go in and go, I'm going to model vulnerability. I just screwed up and owned it. So I admitted, I owned it. And then suddenly someone tried something, and I said, I tried this thing and it didn't work. And then someone else tried this thing. So not only did you now have a more forgiving, if you like, and communicative team, they became more experimental as well. They'd try stuff because it was safe to mess up, because Dan had messed up. So yeah, definitely the way you give and receive feedback can affect the system. The system you're in can affect the way you give and receive feedback. Certainly, I'm working with across many cultures. Indian organizations, Indian culture tends to be quite hierarchical. American culture tends to be quite command and control. And although they sound like the same thing, they're different. Right? So command and control is about is about telling people what to do. Hierarchical is about deferring to seniority. And both of those, again, there's double-edged sword, right? There's times when hierarchy is useful, there's times when hierarchy is completely the wrong thing. So understanding the system you're in and how to navigate that through feedback is really powerful. Thank you, that's a brilliant question.
Awesome question. Sorry to cut it off, but we don't have any more time. But we hope to see you in our next talk. And thank you again. Huge round of applause for Dan North.
Thank you.